Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Brittany, do you want to call roll?
Yeah, I can verify that a quorum is present.
Great. So we are on to item 3, which are matters subsequent to posting the agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to add? Not hearing anything, so we'll go on to item number 4, which is public comment for any matter that is not on the agenda. So if you're one of the attendees and you want to comment on something that's not on this agenda, please raise your hand so we can allow for that. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Just give it one more second. Okay, so we're on to the consent agenda. Anyone have any questions or want to make a motion?
I'll move the consent.
I'll second.
Great. Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Could we just very quickly check that there are no public comments on the consent agenda?
Yes, let me go to public comment for the consent agenda. Okay, I think no public comment.
Okay, for the consent agenda, Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority is absent, Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Great. So now we're on to our regular items. So we'll go to A, the closed session report.
And I can verify that there was no reportable action taken during the closed session in February.
Great. Any public comment on that item? Hearing any, so we're on to item B, which is our general manager's report. So I'll pass it over to Alex.
Well, welcome everybody and thank you again. I wanted to use this opportunity to brief the board on a couple key areas that are relevant for our work and for the upcoming year. So we'll pull up some slides and I'll use these slides as discussion items. We have a few minutes and I welcome questions as we go. The most substantive item we'll cover in the GM report is just the updates on planning. And what I'm doing here is trying to give you guys a sort of update on where we're at in the planning process and where I think it's going. So none of this is finalized, but this should serve as sort of a warm up for everyone as we head towards the end of our fiscal year. And as you'll recall, as we get to the end of the fiscal year, we want to have a good work plan for the following fiscal year. We want to have a budget presented that everybody understands and is prepared to vote on. So next slide, please, Amy, and thank you. So first, just where we are is the process we've been on in this simple 3-step process was to do a bunch of member interviews. We've conducted those interviews with all of our members, all 9 of our members. And so we've used those interviews to gather and clarify our understanding of what would be helpful. And as many of you know, one of the key questions we've asked in these interviews is what sort of do you foresee CC Power doing for you in the next 1 to 2 years? So we worked a lot on that, and that's going to really inform us. And then we take that information, and we're now in the second step where we're developing work plans. Those work plans will translate to, I would say a medium level list of work we're going to try and take on in the upcoming 12 months. And then we'll go to the third step. And once we have a pretty clear sense of what we're trying to achieve, we'll develop a resourcing plan on that. And I'll share some of those preliminary, again, I know I'm getting a little ahead of you. So I'll of course caveat that everybody will have opportunities to share and shape and provide input on this. but I'm trying to help everybody get a sense of it today in this setting. So I am getting a little ahead and just painting a picture of what next year could look like and what some of the preliminary findings or preliminary budgeting estimates might indicate. And so I don't want anyone to feel like this is final. We'll have tons of opportunities to iterate on it. So next slide. So what have we learned from the members in terms of what they would like? And I've tried to summarize, many hours of interviews as effectively as possible. And I've grouped it in a few ways, but very broadly, there have been some consistent themes emerging, and the members have expressed support for continued participation in CC Power, continued reasonable investment in CC Power. And there's what's really bubbled up is an interest and priority interest in the work CC Power can do for you to support project pipeline development. What I mean by that is visibility to supporting your procurement teams and power supply related joint activities, whether that's bulk buys or other sort of joint actions related to supporting your power procurement groups. So a preliminary work plan that we've been developing could include some work, and I've categorized it in 4 buckets to help you get a sense of it. So one is execution. So for those of you who've participated in our existing contracts, continue to support the successful implementation of contracted or future projects. So that really looks like phase 3 work in our language of project development. More phase 1 and phase 2 work on the pipeline side. So support procurement and power supply related project opportunities, including on deal flow, and helping your team have visibility to join into projects that may be a good fit for your portfolio. Another somewhat new concept that there's bubbling up support for is this concept of gaining scale in areas where we may not currently have scale. And so one of the tools to do that would be to explore a master services contract approach to help us scale service contracts. And so that's a way we could sort of do a bulk buy, but through the contracting strategy. Here in the language we're using there is the master services contract, so scale. And then while it's perhaps a little less defined, there's consistent feedback and interest in work to de-risk parts of your operations. And so we could support efforts to de-risk individual CCA activities, and including with project ownership, which, as many of you know, we are looking at direct pay capture and exploration, or possible tech diversity efforts. Many of the ideas and possible value propositions CC Power could provide could be lumped into this de-risking category. So there's a lot more to it, but what we're trying to do is translate and group all of that into a reasonable work plan. So from here, I just lay out a bit more of sort of what this might mean budgetarily and resourcing wise, but I wanted to pause here in case anyone had any reactions or questions on the preliminary findings. And likewise, if you think we're wildly missing something, please give me that feedback. And then, of course, all of this work would be broken into the 2 normal groups of funding. One is the G&A side, where all members are eligible to participate. And then the other side is the project side, where you only participate if it's a fit and you opt into it. And that fits with our typical cafeteria menu model, where you only pay for the services you want. Okay. All right, so let's keep moving along here. Next slide, please. Thank you, Amy. And so what does this mean for budget? And again, I'm getting way ahead of it because really the work plan's just only recently been gelling. But I wanted to start mapping some of that thinking into a budget and remind everyone that for one of our budget protocol policies, R240201, we need to present a budget proposal to the board 45 days prior to the end of the year. So we're on track for that. That work started. What we're seeing in the budget, so some of the major drivers are there's going to be work related to current projects, working groups, and service offerings that we know people are interested in. There's some potential expanded work scopes based on the work plans and operating needs that may translate into the budget. There's an interest in continuing to build CC Power capabilities to handle more work. So we would see that in the budget. There's further additional activities we might want to do. What I'm referring to now is the fall event, which might be an in-person event that could be beneficial for us to come together for strategic planning and things like that. A candidate location for that is actually Davis. If Director Sears is supportive of us, descending on the town of Davis and, causing problems for him. And then lastly, continued achievement of the savings goal. So you'll recall that last year we started a path to build a version of a reserve fund for CC Power, probably over 4 or 5 years. There's some protocols to it. And so we're just going to continue on that path. I don't really see much changing there. And so if you look back, what does this all mean? It's hard to, at this early stage, break the budget into sort of very clear numbers for everyone, but I wanted to flag that I'm seeing potential increases in the range of 55 to 70% on the budget. And that actually maps pretty closely to last year, where there was a budget increase of 61%. And, primarily what you've seen over the last year was going from 1 staff to 2 staff. Right. And so that'll swing the budget, and then we'll probably continue to see a little bit of growth if there's an interest in continued investment. And so we can talk about resourcing on the next slide. And so resourcing is something I think we want to do very carefully. And my understanding historically is even in the foundation of CC Power, there was a desire to inherently make smart budget strategies that kept CC Power resourced at the right level, not to, so that it didn't grow beyond what members were comfortable with. So there's a lot of ways we can do resourcing of things. We can look at it from a FTEs or full-time equivalent count, or we can look at sweat equity, or we can look at service providers. And as you know, CC Power has kind of tried a lot of these approaches. If we do look at building additional competencies through FTEs or service providers, some of the areas that are percolating up from the strategic plan would be the following. More capability on the project evaluation side. So project and financial analyst capabilities could be something we pursue, and that could be used for project analysis, evaluation support, or modeling. And this very much would map to pipeline development. There's more on the operations and admin side. So we're getting to a point where members want better, cleaner access to files. We need to have the right protections and authentication so members can access files seamlessly but safely. And so it's creating more of an operations need to sort of administer these sort of day-to-day member engagement and operations issues. We're also looking at, and again, I'm not saying we may approach this in different ways, but financial competencies. There's a high likelihood we take on prepays and debt, possible debt issuance in the coming year or two. And so we wanted to look at what competencies we need there. On the IT side, as many of you recall, we've been looking at data infrastructure and how each CCA has its own ways of doing work. And was there sort of data infrastructure tools that could be helpful? I group this under the IT competency, and sort of the management of tools or selection of tools could be a competency we want to build. And then lastly, more project origination and project management. This again would support deal flow, origination, and contracts. And as you guys know, I think in the vein of deal flow, originating a project, iterating with members through the phase 1 process, and then supporting and leading the process through phase 2, which is really where members can opt in and see if a project is something they're interested in. There's a fair bit of work there, but there's also a lot of value. So we've been looking at the project origination and project management competency as something that we may want to expand. As you know, CC Power already has 2 staff, and so we don't want to grow too quickly or inappropriately. So I'm just teeing this up now, and there'll be a lot of opportunities for us to think about what we're comfortable with and how quickly or what additional skills we want to bring in. Okay. So that's the quick update on the strategic planning. Let me pause there before we shift gears. Any reactions or insights people want to share at this time? Okay. Well, so stay tuned on this because this issue will be coming back over the next couple meetings as we get closer to finalizing our plans for 24-25.
Hey,
Let
Alex,
me, oh, yeah, go ahead, Director Marshall. Thank you.
sorry, I know I'm probably supposed to raise my little icon hand. So I wanna appreciate the detail you provided here, under the second bullet, FTEs. And the only comment I would have is that the devil will be in the detail, right, going forward. And we had a very good meeting with you. I do appreciate the exercise and research you're doing. And so I think, what I'm seeing here is a fair bit of continued focus on power services, contracts, potentially, build transfer. The financial competencies are related to power services. And so I'll only speak for ourselves that I think I'm hopeful that that continues to be the priority and the focus. And sort of the operations and admin is TBD and perhaps, further down the list.
So from my standpoint, Director Marshall, that is what I'm trying to express. And yeah, I heard loud and clear sort of if you think of CC Power in these buckets of power supply work and then maybe program support for the CCAs or maybe operations support for the CCAs, a lot of the feedback was to lean into the first bucket and really continue to try and build an investor or establish more competencies there in the bucket of power supply related joint action. Okay, great. Yeah, and you'll all have a chance to take a look at this and provide additional input. And I do expect a fair amount of iteration as we kind of get closer over the next few months. Okay, so I wanted to provide a couple other quick updates on some areas of work. So let's move to the next slide, please. So we wanted to disclose the contract that was signed in the past month. One contract was signed. And in line with what I was just saying, how members want better, more seamless access to file sharing and grouping of information. We've signed one contract with a not to exceed of 15,000. It's a time and materials contract. And the scope of work here is member access and file management approach, strategy, and implementation. So many of you know Cal CCA and are familiar with their IT systems where they've used Microsoft Office and Suites. And we're looking to replicate some versions of that. So we're getting a roadmap and then we'll decide if we want to implement it. And that's what this contract is about. It was sole source to One Stop Operations. They were the party that helped Cal CCA and they gave us a reasonable rate. So it made sense to move forward with the contract at this time. Budget-wise, that'll land in the legal and technical support category, and we have budget for that pursuant to the budget of 23-24 that you guys approved. And unless there are questions, we'll move on. One thing I'm excited about as we look at sort of novel technologies or different areas where joint action may make sense, we're helping a lot of the members gradually build more familiarity with certain technologies. One of the areas we're doing this with is in hydrogen. And so part of this is we have a site tour coming up for the Lodi Energy Center. This is a really neat facility that has a gas plant. And when they redid the turbine a handful of years ago, they opted to have hydrogen combustion capability. So they're kind of a unique gas plant already in California that has hydrogen capable turbine or turbines. And then they also happen to have this sort of neat physical location where they're close to a rail line that's also close, that leads to the Port of Oakland. The Port of Oakland can use hydrogen, maybe green hydrogen, or they could burn it. So they have this unique business case for and value proposition for hydrogen. We wanted to use this as an opportunity for all of us to learn more. And it's really not too far from the Bay Area where many of our members are located. So this is March 27th at 10 a.m. to 1. It will include a lunch and it's in Lodi. And so we only have a tour limit of 30. And it will be very valuable, useful learning to see full-size plant with hydrogen capability and understand it. And then we'll send out an Evite link if anyone wants to join. Of course, if we do have board members, we'll make sure that we're careful and that this is just for education purposes and not at all for any decision making at this time. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that. That's coming up next week. And then there's one final update. I wanted to check in with everybody and give you a quick update on the IRA Phase 2 plan, where just as a high-level reminder, we've gone through Phase 1. The board approved Phase 2A, which is where we move through a solicitation process to get to shortlists. And then at that point, you have another sort of major decision point where members may want to opt into a 2B where we negotiate and try to sign a contract or not. And so we're still early in the Phase 2A, but the next slide will give you a quick update on where we're at. So we have all 9 of the CCAs that are part of CC Power participating here. We're making a lot of progress, and CC Power's Director of Origination, Philippe, has been moving this forward. And I wanted to just compliment you all because your staff have been engaging very productively here. And I feel like everybody's helping us be successful, which is good. There's a lot of learning and a lot of subparts to this project. As a reminder, we have at least 4 sub-teams working here, and there's a lot of new documentation that we're setting up that hopefully you guys can use as templates if you ever want to do this on your own. And so what we've completed recently is we're narrowing down the procurement objectives, size, and timing. We finalized the scope of work for the solicitation vendor, so we'll have a party help us run the solicitation. And then we're making good progress on the cost sharing agreement, the scope of work for our own owner's engineer. And that's very important because this will be a time where we're looking at possibly owning something. So having that engineer riding along with us and advising us on the viability of any project from an engineering standpoint is really valuable. Plus, they can scrutinize any bids and help us assess sort of risks on that side with an engineering lens. And then we're also working and lining up build transfer agreement counsel. So that's a really critical role that will help us specifically with the legal contracting side of the build transfer. And in some ways that will also map to a bond counsel, which is not shown here, but is something that we're also working on. And those counsels can be separate or under the same firm. And then where we go from here is we've got the teams built. We're starting to get the contractors in place. And so the next deliverables are to kind of finalize that initial prep work, and then we're really off and running. So the upcoming deliverables to pin down are the scope of work for the vendor's owner engineer solicitation. We'll contract with vendors. We'll develop pro forma PPAs, the tolling agreement, and the BTA agreement draft. And then we'll also have the bond financing team set up. So once we get all that done, then we're in a really good position to actually move the solicitation forward. At that point, you'll probably have a lot of work on the sub teams happening, but we'll also be in a waiting period where we've launched the solicitation. And then we're waiting for the bids. And so we want to be ready to evaluate the bids, group it into the right shortlists based on any evaluation criteria, and then we'll be sort of heading towards the final parts of the Phase 2A, which is where everybody will understand if they're interested to move forward or not, and we'll make decisions. So I'm excited by this work. I know it's one slide, but there's actually been a lot of work to get all this moving. And so I want to thank Philippe and also your guys' staff for helping us be so successful in moving this forward. It has been a bit of a blue sky exercise. So it's taking a lot of critical thinking from everybody to get it down to manageable projects that we can really execute on. And I think people have done a great job. So any questions on this before I wrap up the GM update? All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Mitchell. Back to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alex. So we'll go to public comment on the GM report. Anyone wanting to comment on that? Okay, I'm not seeing any board members also have items they wanted to discuss on the GM report. Okay, then we're on to item C, which is a resolution to commend and thank Garish for his service to California Community Power. Garish, I really appreciate all of your work to form CC Power. I definitely know that this organization probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground without your leadership and your service to it. So really thank you. I remember some of the first phone calls discussing with you whether or not an organization like this would be valuable to us as a CCA. And it's great to see where this organization is today and what it will continue to do in the future, and really attribute a lot of that to your leadership here. So thank you. So I will open it up to other directors. And then Garish, I'm sure you'll have a few words to say as well. All right, I see Barb and then Matthew. Sorry, Barb, do you want to go first? We can't hear you, unfortunately. It's like you're still muted. I'll go to
Can you
Matthew.
hear me now?
Just try.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to acknowledge the amazing career of Garish, and not just among us and our CCA world, but I first encountered Garish when he was in the public power community, working in a board setting like this. It was CMUA, and Garish is someone who handles himself with such grace and allows us all to benefit from his thinking, but also is always just a role model for listening to others and taking in their thoughts, and really allowing the public process, the vetting, to happen in such a respectful manner. And I've always admired that about you, Garish, and with humor. And that always gets you through, right? The tough times. It's the humor that we come back to. So I just want to wish you the best, Garish, as you move on, but recognize not just your power and influence and contributions to the CCA community, but also to the publicly owned utility community that we ran in before this run. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Barb. Matthew.
Yeah, I think, Garish, you're a big part of getting this started and kind of, building the vision for it. And I think, speaking as one of the small CCAs, it's probably more valuable and more important to us than to a bigger CCA like Silicon Valley. And so, the fact that something like this was established that, we could participate in, I think has a lot of impact. And so, your leadership in that is very much appreciated.
Okay, Sean.
I'll just be brief and say ditto to what others have already said, but I also just personally want to thank you, Garish, for always being available. When I picked up the phone to ask questions or get a briefing on CC Power last year, and I just always appreciate your thoughtful and measured responses. And I'll just say that going forward, we're going to miss you, and there's a little phrase that I'm going to ask, and it's WWGD. What would Garish do? So do want to say thank you. I will be thinking of you and hopefully stay in touch. Have a great retirement. Well deserved.
Great. Let's go to Mitch and then Rob.
Yeah, Garish, not a whole lot to add, just thank you, but especially for the humor. But the other thing I would say is not just for the work you've done with Silicon Valley, but with CC Power, really, I appreciate the 50-year vision idea, right? I mean, this is something that is going to outlast all of us that are here on this call. And so I appreciate the forward-looking and the vision that this all represents. So thank you for that, along with the humor, I guess.
Okay, let's go to Rob and then Nick.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, I think Barb and Mitch both said it really well. It is the vision, but it's also the tone and the approach of always welcoming conversations and helping actually give voice to the concern and the ideas that others are bringing to the table and finding a way to drive solutions along the way. And I think that's been incredible. Personally, you've been a great friend and mentor for me. I really appreciate the foresight and vision you have in being very purposeful and making sure that Monica, who is literally coming in from behind you, is going to be there to kind of continue that same approach and same sort of keeping the industry as well as Silicon Valley at the forefront of decision making. So just congratulations on your career. Enjoy retirement. But of course, don't lose our phone numbers because I'm sure we'll want to reach out and continue to use your expertise. Thanks a lot, Krish.
Okay, let's go to Nick.
Well, Girish, I will just echo much of what others have said here. And we wouldn't be here without you. Whether it's CC Power or frankly, the CCA movement more broadly. So thank you. And I know you're saying you're moving into retirement, but I just can't believe we're not going to see you in some energy capacity one way or the other in the not too distant future. So thank you. And it's just been such a pleasure.
Alex, yeah.
Well, on behalf of the staff of CC Power, Girish, we want to say thank you and acknowledge you. And we don't have enough of a reserve fund to get you a putter or something for your golf game, but I just wanted to personally say thanks so much for helping me land and for really helping this organization think about what we're here to do and how to grow and support our members. So I just think you've done a fantastic job, and I also appreciate how you carry yourself, how you give feedback, and how you teach. So thanks so much. I personally feel really lucky to have gotten a chance to work with you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't see any more hands raised, but yes, Girish, you leave an amazing legacy behind you. You're going to be so missed here. I think we're ready to, oh, I'm sorry, we'll go to the public comment. And anybody wanting to comment on this item? Looks like we have one hand raised.
Hi, Girish. This is Eric Vium from Slow Climate Coalition. While we don't have a personal relationship, I will say that I have admired your leadership from a distance and just want to recognize the role that the CEOs and the executive directors of our CCAs play on the front lines of community energy and the difficult job that you have building something that hasn't been built before. And so thank you for that, the energy and commitment to community energy.
Okay, thank you. All right, any additional public comment? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
This is a resolution. Could we get a motion in a second?
I'm sorry, I'm happy to motion. People.
Second.
Great.
Okay, for resolution 240301, Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes, with tears.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
I think Girish can vote on his own commendation.
Yes.
thank you. Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
I guess so.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
All right. Well, we are on to item number D, which is another commendation and thanking of Matthew Marshall, who is also leaving us, unfortunately. And just really thank you for your service over the years, not only with CC Power, but also CCA. I'm always impressed by what Redwood Coast Energy has accomplished. You know, some of the things that come to mind are your microgrid and your leadership on offshore wind. Just really can't thank you enough, Matthew, for everything you've done for the CCA movement. And I will open it up again. All right, Nick.
Well, I get to go first, so I get to sort of give you your flowers, and then everyone can follow suit. I do want to just say, you're one of the when I think about sort of the founders of this movement, we have a couple of them here, but really the work you've done in Redwood paved the way for a lot of what we are doing today. And your leadership and you're growing the organization, and really punching above your weight as a small CCA, but really digging in on the really meaty topics and helping us as a broader group solve sort of some of our thornier problems, and also giving us a perspective that might be different than those of us who are in sort of large coastal city kinds of environs. So I just want to thank you for that, for the commitment you've had to Redwood and to the CCA community more broadly. So I know you're gonna, again, we'll be seeing you one way or the other, I'm sure. And thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Garish and then Sean.
Matthew, we've had a lot of side conversations at conferences and meetings, and you're always so thoughtful and you get to the heart of the matter. I really love that about conversations with you. Also want to recognize your contributions at Cal CCA and the overall CCA movement. You've done very well there. Thank you for that. And then, of course, your sartorial splendor. Very good. You raised the bar. I would expect folks over here, the male directors, to follow in your footsteps. So let's make sure that Rob Shaw, Mitch Sears, Nick Chassett before July, can follow in your footsteps. Hopefully they have good calves like you. You know what I'm talking about. And then the other thing I'll think about when I think of you, you're the master of the microgrid. It's amazing. It's what Nick said, punching above your weight. And wow, what an amazing project. And you did it in collaboration and partnership with PG&E and so many other stakeholders. We're on the right side of this disruption in our energy business, and you really manifested at RCA. So thank you very much for your service, and all the best.
Okay, we'll go to Sean.
Cool. Matthew, I just want to say, maybe go even further back into the Wayback Machine and say, thank you for the vision that you had for Humboldt County and for the biomass plants that were struggling, for looking at all of the options and the ways that community choice energy could be of service to your service territory, and really remaining focused on the economic development benefits. Really, you were probably the first to focus on how that could really work in terms of keeping jobs local. I remember many conversation about that. And it wasn't an easy task because it was an expensive task, but you stayed at it, and I think you managed to make it work in at least one or two of those situations back then, and then went on to grow the staff and launch one of the premier CCAs in terms of all of the other services that Redwood Coast was already offering, but then really leading the way on thought leadership around microgrids and true partnerships with PG&E and the Schott Energy Center. So just want to acknowledge all the work that you did leading up to your CCA, and I wish you nothing but the best with your family and look forward to seeing you again. Good luck to you.
Great. Thanks, John. Okay, let's go to Mitch and then Rob.
Yeah, Matthew, so from a small to mid-sized CCA to another, appreciate all the work that you've done up there. I think others have captured it as well, but just wanted to acknowledge sort of the scrappy, roll up your sleeves, let's figure this kind of thing out in your particular service territory, and acknowledging that sometimes just finding a way forward is really the trick. So you and I have had a lot of kind of side conversations about microgrids and about sharing of projects, and because it seemed to be sort of right sized for VCE and Redwood to partner together. So we're going to continue on with that approach with whoever succeeds you, but really appreciate the conversations and the insight that you've been able to provide to us. Hopefully we provided something back to you in that as well. But yeah, your viewpoint is going to be missed. And Girish, yes, I will work on the calves, I guess. So anyhow, thanks, Matthew.
All right, let's go to Rob.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, Matthew, it's all really been said, but your leadership really in community engagement and obtaining sort of that standard as a trusted energy advisor in your community, in the offshore wind discussion, no matter where I was in the country in talking with people, they would ask me whether I knew of Redwood Coast Community Energy. And I think that speaks to your leadership and the vision you had there. The other piece that I wanted to really recognize is the nuts and bolts of being really a great manager, mining and developing talent, because you have great people on your staff, and that's hard to do for all of the CCAs, but you've really taken advantage of Humboldt and the people that you have there and really develop them to be leaders. And that's an incredible job, and congratulations.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, Alex.
So really quick, Matthew, thanks so much for your service. It's been great working with you. I wanted to echo what Rob just said. You have a great team, and they all speak really highly of you. And so it's really, I think, a tribute to your leadership. You've maintained and preserved that team so that you can accomplish so much. And I also think you are the coolest of all the directors, given that you run rafting trips in the summer and have kind of really been able to integrate professionalism and fun in your organization, which I think is part of why you guys have been so successful. So I hope we stay in touch, and I'll miss you. And thanks so much for helping. And then, of course, thanks for helping lead us on the ad hoc committee on offshore wind, where didn't get much fanfare, but we are truly like the only authorized sort of buyer. And there's still a plan that we're going to look seriously at offshore wind through a solicitation at some point. So, that's a pretty significant accomplishment. And I think is a tribute to you that we got to that point. So thank you very much.
Great. Matthew, is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, I feel like my contributions to CC Power are much less than Girish's, so I had the good fortune of leaving at the same time as him, so that it would be awkward if you guys didn't say stuff to me. But no, it's been a pleasure working with everybody, and I'm excited to watch the organization move forward, and obviously appreciate all the kind words. And for CC Power, we've been much more of a beneficiary than a instigator, and so we're very grateful for the organization.
Great, thanks. And I see Barbara, you have your hand raised.
And there's the humble in Humboldt County, right? You could almost predict he was going to say that. Matthew, you've just been such a great contributor and a friend, and again, another leader that we're going to miss, but know that we'll see your strong team right behind you, and look forward to seeing that legacy continue. So, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to public comment. It does look like we have a hand raised over there.
Great, thank you. Matthew, this is Eric Vium, and I did want to take this opportunity because we do have a personal relationship, and I do consider you a friend, to just acknowledge you amongst your peers for the contributions you have made. We've known each other since the early days of CCA formation, and I just want to just call out just the core of Redwood Coast Energy Authority in those early days was energy efficiency and direct install services to the community. And what grew out of that is a really influential and innovative CCA. And so, I just want to acknowledge you for your vision and leadership and your contributions to building this movement.
All right, thank you. I think we're on to voting on this item, number 6D.
Yes, could we get a motion and a second, please?
Sorry, I'm happy to motion to approve. And
I'll second Barbara Hill.
Great, thank you. For resolution 240302, Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
yes,
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
great. So we are on to item 6E, which is the adoption of our Getting It Built Right agreements. And I will turn it over to our ad hoc committee, Chair Garish, in a second here, but I just really want to thank all of the engagement of the board members and our stakeholders and the public. This is an item that we've been working on for almost a year and a half. And if you recall, we had our Getting It Built Right workshop back on November 3rd here in San Jose. So really appreciate everyone attending there and all the feedback that we received both in person and then just follow up. Really helpful, and I think it'll be something that will make CC Power stronger. And I'm very happy to present the agreements that we talked about in February at the February meeting, and we will consider today, which really push this organization further to addressing both labor and environmental justice issues, which are so important to all of us. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Garish to talk a little bit more about it and some of the discussion from the ad hoc committee.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. So the staff report from February and this month goes over our thinking in making the recommendations. Really appreciate the discussion we had since last month. Also appreciate the feedback provided to us by the Alliance in the form of a letter that was distributed to the board. So I just want to kind of go back a little bit and say, we really appreciate and value our relationship with everyone in the Alliance, and we are going to continue to have that relationship because we're going to be building so much, and we can't do it without our stakeholders. And with the IRA being passed, the default is pretty much every project that we enter into will have a lot of what we were talking about back in 2021, but since the IRA was passed, it's just going to be the default. Things like apprenticeship programs, PLAs, and things like that. I also wanted to recognize that the letter talked about delaying our decision-making for a month or so. And going back to where we were, the ad hoc committee, and the reason why we don't want to have a one-size-fits-all is there's so many variables when it comes to projects, right? There's one is just, for example, the megawatt size of the project, and then the participation in each project. We could have from 2 to 9 members participating in each project. And each of those members have their own governing boards, their local policies, things like that. And that's 2 to 7 who could join there. The kind of technology that we would be investing. Is it a mature technology? Is it an emerging technology? Another variable is this maybe joint purchase we're making? Is that subject to or in reaction to a CPUC procurement order, or is it something we are doing voluntarily? All these variables, when you put it together, there's so many if-then kind of scenarios that I think the 4 agreements allow us to come together as a group in a timely manner when we have a project in front of us, when we know the megawatts, who's participating, the kind of technology, why we're doing it, and figure out a way to adopt the policy that will get maximum participation at CC Power. And it's very similar to some of the more mature joint powers agencies in California that a few of us have been part of. And we have communicated with them, whether it's Northern California Power Agency or Southern California Public Power Authority, very similar setup to the 4 agreements that we have. So I kind of see the 4 agreements, if the board votes on it today, is just the beginning. It's the end of one phase maybe of 2.5 years of having discussions with various stakeholders. But it's just the beginning of another phase of engagement with our partners. So for every project that comes up, we will be engaged with our partners to see how our locally developed policies can be meshed together. And then each of us in this implementation phase can basically go back to our boards to either up our policies and make them higher or lower to make sure that we get what our local agencies want. Given that we've had this discussion for quite a while, and I would like to end by making a motion that the board adopt these 4 agreements, knowing fully well we'll continue to be engaged with our partners. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Girish, and I'll second that motion. Agree that we've been at this a long time, and it might be the end of one phase, but really the beginning of another. But I also just want to reiterate, what we are agreeing to today, which I think are some substantial benefits for CC Power, which I'm so happy to support. One is that all of us agree that we are going to abide by our governing body's policy. So CC Power is not a vehicle to participate in a project that doesn't agree with your local policy. I think that is so important and huge, and I'm so happy to second that, to have CC Power adopt that policy. The second is that CC Power is going to distribute all of the member policies and practices on an ongoing basis. So I think that's really a great opportunity for all of us to learn and further engage, as Girish said. The third is that CC Power members are going to individually agree to regularly review these model practices and consider them in recommending updates to their own governing boards on which policies and practices are appropriate for their own jurisdiction. So I think that's another really forward-thinking agreement that I'm so happy to support. CCAs are very good at learning from each other and continuing to, further the conversation and advance goals. So I think that's such an important part of the agreement. And then finally, CC Power agrees to host a webpage with links to all the members' procurement policies and their relevant plan, so that we make this very transparent to the public. And again, I think that's so important. It's just great to be part of an organization that's really leaning in and making progress on this while also recognizing that, CC Power in itself is not a load serving entity. All of our member CCAs are, but CC Power really exists for us to jointly procure for projects. And so I think it's really important to also respect members' own individual governing boards and their policies. So just really thank all of the stakeholder engagement and also all of board members and the ad hoc committee for all of the work on this item. Okay, and with that, I see some hands, so we'll go to Barb, and then I see Rob with your hand raised.
Thank you, Lori and Garish. I appreciate the work of the ad hoc committee to move us along. I think this does move us along, and it's a very constructive effort. I would like to be sure that I can respond to my commission with a clear understanding and direction on, in particular, the statement in the agreement that we would abide by the governing board's policies and not circumvent. And to that end, I propose to add to that statement that CC Power members agree to abide by the participating member policies that meet the highest standard. I'm nervous about how this might play out in discussion. I think we want to know in San Francisco that if we're a participant in a project, we could assure our commission that we're following through with their direction to us, which is, to follow our policies. I'm not certain how that would play out, and maybe this is a question more for our general manager in terms of how he would navigate the process. But it's my understanding as I read that item 1 within the resolution on getting it built right agreements, that not circumventing would mean we would all sort of rise to the highest standard. And if that is the intention, then I think we should state it more clearly. And so I have this language to offer to make that a clear statement. And then in terms of implementing that statement under item 4 in the resolution, I would recommend language and ask for your support on language that would state, to support CC Power procurement activities, CC Power will compile the member procurement policies that represent the highest standard. I recognize that I'm in perhaps a different position than my colleagues, in that I do have a resolution from my commission that asks or directs, not asks, directs me to really push for the highest standards. And so that's what I'm attempting to do here. And I provided the sentences that I just read to our general counsel. I don't know, Brittany, if you are in a position to put them on the screen, if that would facilitate conversation. But that's what I would like considered, please.
So, sorry, go ahead, Brittany.
I was just going to say, yes, I can share those statements if we would like to do that.
I defer to the chair on whether we should put them up, but I just wanted to make sure you knew they were there. Thank you.
As chair, as the maker of the motion, should I be?
Yeah, sorry, energy efficiency and my lights are going out.
I'll just jump in from a procedural standpoint. We do have a motion and a second on the agreements as written. So we can continue the discussion of amendments, but we do have to address that initial motion and second first.
Yeah, great, Brittany. So what I would suggest is, Garish, I have some comments as the second on the motion, but I'll go to you as the first if you're open to those amendments that we heard from Director Hale. So let's do that first. Yeah.
Director Hale, I appreciate the comments you made to amend both items Agreement 1 and 4, I really think those are implementation issues. And I'd love to be part of that discussion, or Monica would be part of that discussion. Really, when it comes to the highest standards, I love that as an aspirational goal. However, when it comes down to implementation, it would get to highest standards for exactly what. And I think those are implementation details that will be worked out. There are just too many variables around how this will be worked out that I'm not, at this point, unless we convince otherwise, open to making that change. So I would rather that we continue discussion and get to a vote on the agreements as written. And the way I see it is, the sentiments you express would be perfectly addressed, would be the perfect time to address it would be during implementation.
Yeah, thanks, Girish. There's the second on your motion. I agree with that. I'm support of, voting on the agreements as they're written today. I share your sentiment that I think the highest standard is a great aspirational goal. What I am concerned about, though, is that that is too ambiguous. And, what is highest to one, especially when we're talking about labor, environmental justice, a variety of different issues in these policies, that is what is the highest to one could be interpreted differently among different members. And then that could result in, no one participating in projects and CC Power, unfortunately, not being successful at all. I agree. I think it's really important to work this out in implementation. And I think also, as I stated before, very important that we are all agreeing today by these policies that each member agency has to abide by their policy. So where I think I see a lot of value in that is that if each member isn't absolutely sure that the project going forward abides by their policy, they absolutely have the option to withdraw. And I think that's really important to respect. By the same token, those of us that, have a policy and maybe another member's participation in a project, increases that a little bit. And we're all very clear that that still is in line with our local policy. I think that's great. Individual members can choose to continue to participate that and perhaps up-level their own policy, but it gives each member the choice to assess that for themselves and to make sure they're abiding by their own policy without addressing some ambiguity. So those are my comments on the motion on the table. I will go to Rob and then Nick.
Thank you, Lori. I have some questions and comments. Do you want questions first and then comments, or do you want them together, Chair?
Or it's your discussion,
Okay.
your time.
Well, you may regret that. At a high level, I always like to start wondering why and how we are here. So, what the gold standard from my board's perspective, ours is the gold standard. And if all of you want to adopt our board policy and how you think about these, we encourage you to do that. And I see it as my job and my board's direction to enforce my board's policy. And I appreciate where, and I do have some questions about the implementation and some of the thinking. I appreciate where the ad hoc committee is coming from in evaluating that, because we've all gone through these enrollments and talking to city councils. And one of the biggest things that I hear is, I don't want the county of whomever imposing their policies on my city of whomever. That's not our role, I tell them. We are a facilitator. We're here to help you achieve your climate goals. And that's how I see CC Power. They need to be a facilitator. And the JPA considers that, because the JPA says in it that it's not a policy-making body. And it's only there to consider how it's going to operate. And I know I was part of the negotiations about what that is intended to be, that distinction between policymaker, but we need to think about how we operate. And one of the reasons it's there is to avoid this conversation, which is How is CC Power adopting a policy going to overstep, impact, change my own board's policy? And my fear of even this conversation, the way it's structured, is that we're taking away from CC Power the ability to facilitate, because now I'm trying to figure out whether or not it's a tool I can use. And if we make it such that it's not a tool that's available to us, we're not going to utilize it and it won't be successful. My board's direction is to implement our policy. I think it's really important, Alex, and I want to engage in the conversation around, how you're going to gather the information so that I can apply my board's policy. And I think as managers, that's where we should all be looking. How do we apply our board's policy within a framework so that the values of my board are being respected if we are participating in a project? But I don't want to tell San Francisco that they have to adopt my board's policies. That's, I think, inappropriate and antithetical to the local choice that we're all founded on. I do think that from the standard that we have implemented, it's about the flow of information. The agreements that are here in front of us, agreement number 3, directing that I'm going to take to my board on some pattern, potential changes. That's really for my board to direct me and give me that input. But I think as an aspirational and as a good management practice, I understand where that recommendation is coming from and can live with that. But I think from a standpoint of what CC Power is supposed to be here for, we really need to get in line with how this agency is going to help facilitate us making those joint procurement and sharing risk decisions. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there, and if I hear something that sparks another question, but I think that's really important that we're here to help facilitate our values from our boards, not to export those values outside of that.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Rob. So Nick and then Sean.
I think Rob made a lot of the points that I wanted to make. I mean, I think similarly, we think our policy at AVA is the best policy. And, that's the policy that I'm here to implement and ensure that any project, whether it's directly contracted by AVA or, through a conduit, meets the policies that our board has. And so I appreciate that, we're trying to articulate the fact that essentially you cannot use the conduit to circumvent your policies. I think that's useful language. In practice, every one of our boards has to approve any project that that they seek to participate in through CC Power. And if the board, in so doing, decides that they want to set aside any policy, that is that board's decision. It's so the accountability, irrespective of whether a project is through a conduit or not, the accountability of our elected boards remains. And I think that's generally where it is most appropriate. We are not elected officials. We serve at the pleasure of our boards of elected officials who represent our constituents. So, that's really my primary goal. Now, I would also say, I do think that there is real value in any, and for all of our participating agencies to consider adopting a policy that, and we have some great templates in the policies that some of us have already adopted. And we have some, tremendous stakeholders who are here for public comment, who I'm sure would be very happy to help you take the work we've done and apply it to your local context. And, to me, in the end, that is the way we're going to ensure that we truly are moving forward with the high road for job creation associated with the projects.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Sean.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with my colleagues and say that PCE is actively looking at an environmental justice policy. So soon it may be the best, and so we don't know the outcome of that yet, right? And so what I think is that what is proposed here establishes meaningful standards. It's a meaningful foundation and sets, maybe a floor from which to move up and improve over time. But I don't think that it's CC Power's role to sort of assert or go beyond what existing policies may be at a particular CCA. So I want to echo what Nick just said about, perhaps there's going to be some opportunity and movement toward adopting similar policies to what 3CE has done, AVA has done, and maybe San Francisco, Barb. I'm not sure. But we're actively engaged in that. But I would shy away from overstepping. And to me, the proposed amendment does overstep a bit. It's aspirational and it's good. And I'd love to see it taken up in the next phase when we're talking about operationalizing, how this will actually work. So with that, I would say that I'm in support of the resolution on the table.
Thanks, Sean.
Motion.
Okay,
Thanks.
back to Barb and then Rob.
I appreciate the dialogue. I very much agree that what I'm proposing here is an implementation detail. I think absent it, I'm not exactly sure how item 1, how we implement the sentiment that's expressed in item 1. I've just heard a lot of recognition of there being different policies. And if none of us are going to circumvent our existing policies, we have to have some way of reconciling them if we're going to have joint projects. So that's an implementation detail, providing some direction to our general manager about how those different policies will be reconciled to avoid circumvention, I think is a reasonable request. I recognize from the conversation we've had that I'm in a minority on that sentiment. I also agree that this is a beginning and not an end. So I do look forward to ongoing conversation about how we will implement the stated agreements. Thank you.
Great. We'll go to Rob and then Matthew.
Yeah, Director Hale, I agree. I think the implementation discussion is important. And that's really what I wanted to flag is one, appreciation to the advocates that have initiated this conversation in so many CCAs. It's an important conversation. Those relationships are really important. I think the signals to the market about the standards are really important for developers to see in that commitment. And that's why our board adopted our policy. The ad hoc staff report makes very clear in it that they want to continue to engage conversation. So that's what makes me comfortable that one, there's nothing in these agreements that I can't agree to that prohibits me from evaluating projects. Because from an implementation standpoint, it's really about how my board is going to approve our participation. And as long as CC Power is gathering the information or is willing to reach back out to get information that we may need to supplement some of our analysis internally, I can implement my own policy. And I think we can all make an evaluation of projects in terms of how our policy implicates the project without necessarily needing to have a universal approach to this question, because that's what local communities are about, is not having a universal approach. So I'm very comfortable with the agreements that are there. I think we do need to have those commitments about gathering necessary information that the CCAs need to apply their policies to questions or to projects in the project participation phase. And then that commitment that the ad hoc committee has made to continue conversations and remain engaged. I don't see this as a final vote. I see it as a start.
Great, thank you, Rob. Matthew.
Yeah, just agree with a lot of the comments said. I think I'm pretty sure our policies aren't the best policies, so we're in the bucket of we'll be pulled upward by participating with others that have kind of focused on some of these things more than us. But I think that's where I think it's that where it comes in the process is going to be important to do it up front. So if you're saying, well, there's a project that's going to be San Francisco and RCEA and Silicon Valley, well, okay, we need to at the front end decide, okay, let's get what the parameters are to meet those CCA's needs, so that we're not either in a position of figuring it out later down the road and then having people back out of the project because they're like, wait a minute, this isn't going to cut mustard, I gotta pull out, and then we have a project, have to suffer that. Or conversely, if it gets too far along and then it's like, well, I got to go ask for forgiveness from my board because now it's too late to cut it back out and we need this project. And so I think just making sure that there's a process on the front end, very early to figure out what that highest denominator is for the participants in that particular project and how that gets implemented for whoever's choosing to participate.
Thank you, Matthew. Sean.
Yeah, sorry. I think just sort of piggybacking, Matthew, on what you just said, I do also want to acknowledge the advocates on the call who have been working on this on an individual CCA basis. As I mentioned, we're kind of in the middle of ours right now. And one of the recommendations that they have offered up, which I think makes some sense from an implementation and operations point of view, is to work on a policy comparison matrix. So we kind of are tracking what's going on with our sister agencies, where we're at, where we agree and where the gaps might be, so that we're not always trying to play catch up when these projects, start coming to fruition. So that could be, I think, a meaningful first step in acknowledging and sort of making this whole thing real, so that we can move up without necessarily going beyond our existing policies at this very moment. So I'll just offer that up as maybe a first step in implementation. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. And I think that's exactly what the ad hoc committee, was thinking of when we drafted number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is, we agreed to distribute all the member procurement policies so that we have these templates easily. And then number 3, that all of us individually agree to review them and then consider, and it's important to say consider, whether recommending updates to their governing board regarding those policies are appropriate for their own jurisdiction. So I think those, number 2 and number 3 were really meant to capture that, so that we can all learn together quickly and, continue to up level. So really appreciate all the discussion and the thought here. Not seeing any more board members, and I do see a few hands raised on the public comment side. So we'll go to public comment and then come back to the board. Okay, so let's start with Tim. I saw that your hand was raised first, and then Alex, and then Eric.
Perfect. And you can hear me now?
We can. Maybe we can.
So my name is Tim Frank, and I represent the building trades of the Bay. We have been participating with our environmental and environmental justice colleagues on this concerted effort to try and promote this common suite of values, and have been working on this for a couple of years now. So I appreciate the fact that we have a discussion here, and but I hope we can reorient a little bit here. I think that not only was Barb's suggestion extremely appropriate, but just to reference what Matthew had suggested, there's a good, a strategic advantage in sort of thinking about upfront, signaling to the developers what your values are rather than waiting until the back end. And if you look at what we're actually recommending, they aren't actually policies that have specific mandates for what a project will do. They are more directional, and they suggest what would be valued and what would be considered a priority. And I do not think that is something that should raise the level of concern that I heard expressed by a number of boards, that somehow this will conflict with their own members' posture. And at the end of the day, what we would really like to see the institution of CC Power do is to actually support a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. And I think that there's ways to incorporate a message in this resolution that would send that signal, and hope you are willing to do that. But some of my colleagues will say more, but thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Okay. On to Alex. Yes, Alex. And then Eric.
All right, I guess you guys can hear me. Could you reset the timer, please? Thank you. So Alex Landsberg with the electrical industry. Thank you very much for your comments and your consideration. I want to thank General Manager Hale for putting forth the amendment. You know, listening to this conversation, I think it actually gets directly to the heart of the issue that we raised, and the amendment that Director Hale put forward. And as long as there's multiple policies out there without an objective determination of what is highest or how they rank respective to one another, there is going to be circumvention of somebody's policy at one point or another through the process. For example, potentially. So if you're asking someone to step down in order to to join a procurement, that is ultimately a circumvention of the policy. And I think we ought to also think about how we talk about circumventing. Circumventing has very much a clear connotation that you are lowering, that you are trying to avoid in order that you're trying to avoid something in order to get around, to go beyond, to be better than an established policy. Doesn't seem like a circumvention to me. It seems like it's aspirational. It's you're going further. You're going above and beyond in this case. What I want to make sure that all of the GMs that are on the call recognize and understand is that what we have been proposing, what we are proposing, is intended to streamline the process, intended to make procurement faster, easier, with fewer headaches down the line. And we think that the amendment proposed by General Manager Hale will end up doing that. There's obviously implementation work, and we're willing to do that with you guys, but you need to find a way forward that doesn't force someone to throw out their policies in order to participate. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Eric.
Directors, Eric Viam, coordinator of the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance. First, I want to just be appreciative of this constructive conversation. I mean, from my perspective, this would benefit from more time, although I understand the constraints that your organization is under. But I'm also appreciative of the discussions that we've had leading up till now. What I'm thinking about in all of this is 175 gigawatts and 24 hours of clean energy, and our need to be able to move fast and to be able to do so together. And in that 175 gigawatts, those are workers that are needed to make that happen quickly, and those are communities that need to bear the impacts of the projects and hopefully the benefits of those projects. And that's very apparent to what's happening now in San Luis Obispo County with offshore wind and our Vistra battery project. I've always, I'm concerned about this question of implementation and kind of working things out in implementation. I have often a birdie on my shoulder named Rob Shaw that is consistently encouraging me towards practicality and really the working through on the ground considerations. And so this question of how we work through these standards in kind of an implementation phase just leads me to the question of like who gets left out, right? The workers, the communities, so I just feel as if what's been talked about in previous comments that what we have is a framework that does fit all because of its flexibility, and that what's being called for here first is a matrix, but second is an opportunity for us to talk and share with you as directors for your communities about what we've successfully adopted working with Central Coast and San Francisco and in East Bay. And so ultimately the solution is for your individual boards to adopt the strong standards that we've had success with elsewhere. And that really resolves this question around implementation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. Okay, I'm not seeing, oh, Leslie. I do see one more hand. Leslie Austin.
Yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Mitchell and directors. I agree with all that the folks before me have said. I am the director of Let's Green California, and I would like to echo our support for the adoption of the proposed agreements so that they are a tool for CCA members and CC Power to use. And I agree with the earlier comments provided by Tim. We want to find a way forward to support the incorporation of race to the top language. And we also support a collaborative effort to develop a comparison matrix of member CCA policies. I do agree. I think that's a great, important first step in identifying and implementing best practices. And I think that would ensure that your agreements actually reflect the engagement, the stakeholder engagement that Director Mitchell referenced in her comments earlier. I just think the importance of prioritizing the highest standards in project procurement really can't be overstated. And while I do understand all of the director's feedback today about where those responsibilities lie, I think that it's really important, it's crucial really that high standards for labor, climate, and environmental justice are out, all of the things that we've outlined in our letter, which I hope the directors were able to review in advance of today's meeting, are really important, not only to us as organizations who are working, from the environmental and labor and environmental justice points of view, but also for mitigating or minimizing the risks associated with rapid deployment of project pipeline and power supply activities. So just by prioritizing these standards, I think you're ensuring this is the success of CC Power, and you're creating capacity for increased projects in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm not seeing any other hands raised on public comment. Excuse me, I'll just give it one more second. Okay, I think we can come back to the board. So any directors wanting to talk? Excuse me. I'll go to Director Hale. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, or Vice Chair Mitchell. I heard something in public comment that I want to circle back to the ad hoc committee and verify is not correct. So I can be sure I'm understanding how this would be implemented as it's written. Under the resolution, it's my understanding that there would be no change in CC Power's practice of announcing our expectations on these topics in the context of the RFP that would be issued. Is my understanding correct? So to say it a little differently, whatever standards are going to be applied would be known before there's engagement with the market. Because the RFP would describe what our expectations are, as they do today.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Chair Mitchell.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that's how it would work in implementation, Director Hale. This is where Alex has put together a working group, and that's where this gets discussed. And I think items 2, 3, and 4 in the agreements come to bear there, where I think some of the public comments on comparing. So I would expect the general manager, so let's say we have 5 members participating in a project, the general manager would work something out. And so the market would be informed of the expectations of those members. So I think that takes into account Director Marshall's comments also as to when we talk about it. I think it's right there before we go to the market. So.
Yeah, just agree with Girish and Barbara. I think it's really important that before we go to the market, we have a very clear set of expectations. So let's go to Nick.
Sorry, I'm having a little machine buzzing here. Yeah, so just to that point, I mean, I would say, there was a comment about the market, and I think I agree, and I think part of the rationale for our policy was to send the right signals to the. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. You know what? Let me come back. There's like a beeping here that's distracting me. So, if someone else wants to make a comment, I will come back and let me go deal with my technology issue.
No problem. Any other comments? I have a couple. So first of all, just really want to thank the members of the public for attending today and speaking. I really appreciate all the stakeholder feedback, not only today, but for the last 2.5 years on this issue. Your input is really important to us, and just couldn't thank you more for engaging here today, but also back on November 3rd at the workshop. And as Girish stated in the beginning, I just think it's really important that, this is the end of one phase, but the beginning of another in terms of continuing to up-level and make sure we're responsive, not only to our local governing boards, but also all of the stakeholders in the community. So really appreciate the time today. And I just think, Nick, it's just.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I think what I wanted to say, what I wanted to just highlight was, there was a comment, Barb highlighted this idea that, you want to signal to the market what the standards are. And, I think whatever policy we have, whether it's the policies of the participants or an overarching policy, those will be reflected in any document that is put out to market. Right? When you put your RFO out, that puts your protocols, and you sort of, that's where you're going to stipulate these things. And so it's really in the exercise that, say we're going in right now with design, build, transfer, or the ownership. There's the more behind the scenes, the working group, where you're trying to figure out what do we want to do, who wants to participate, and you start getting to that participation. That's where that is the work that will be done that is most relevant here. And so I think that is also where we would expect that we would be ensuring that our policy adheres, or the procurement adheres to our policies. Otherwise, we would say, well, simply, this is not a project we feel comfortable participating in. And it might be it's 5 CCAs who are in the first round of evaluation. And if the 4 other CCAs say, well, these are the policies we want to apply, it's really incumbent upon me to either convince them to adopt our policy, or say, well, then we can't participate in the project because our policy doesn't allow for it. And I really think that is the right order of operations. I think the order of operations for me is more about, I don't want someone else telling me what policy I should or should not be following. It's really my job to be interpreting my policy and, working with my board to ensure that anything we do abides by our policy. And I think it is incumbent upon all of us to take that responsibility for ourselves, as opposed to having someone tell us what our responsibility is. But again, that's all to say, I'm very supportive of the idea that we use this as a platform to encourage every one of us to adopt a similar framework, because it's going to be that much easier for us to do this work if we're all operating off of similar frameworks. Certainly, Rob, our two policies are a little different. Barb, our policies are a little different. But I think if the three of us were to get together and look at doing a joint procurement, it wouldn't actually be that hard for us to arrive at an overarching policy that meets it would, or put another way, we're already very high. The race to the top is not such a would not be such a trying exercise, because and we might do one thing a little differently than you might do, but we're already so high that and that, again, I think is the work that is most important, is that we all sort of work to adopt a similar framework, because that's the thing that's going to make it easier to work together.
Yeah, no, well said, Nick. And I have to say, I very much appreciate all of the work that Nick and Rob and Barb have done on their policies. I, like Sean, we're right in the middle of doing this work, and just appreciate the work that's come before us. And I expect, our city council will adopt something shortly here. So appreciate all of the work and the engagement on this. Okay, we'll go to Rob. Then hopefully we're almost ready to vote.
Yeah, Lori, I'm sorry. Nick made a point, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it's important to drive home that, it's really about, and where San Francisco and ABA and 3C Energy, it's really about the values. And I think, if we try to define a set policy, everyone must do this, that's not really the end goal objective. It's about the values. And I think this gives us that flexibility. The agreements that are here give me comfort that I can apply my board's values and come to a decision about this. So I'm very comfortable with that approach. And then I think also the thing that's been really helpful for me going through this process are the really honest and frank conversations with local representatives in my region. I think the work the Alliance is doing, highlighting a lot of these conversations, is really important. But I encourage everybody, as you go through the evaluating policies, continue to reach out to your locals and the business managers there, because they have a very good sense of, what are the challenges in their area, where they're ready to perform, and how to develop a policy that's going to be successful for both the local workforce and for the CCAs. So those conversations, Paul Gutierrez, Mike Simonian, those have been really, really powerful in shaping our policy. And I encourage everyone to try to replicate that. Thank you.
Great. And I see our general manager would like to say a few words.
Really quickly, thanks everybody. I don't want to repeat anything. I just want to share my quick view that when important issues get discussed, it's great to have, it's perhaps necessary and valuable to have the right people in the room. So I wanted to thank all the public stakeholders who commented and flew to San Jose and participated in our meeting and volunteered to serve on panels. So there has been a lot of conversation. I'm very thankful, and also to the board for taking time. I know each one of you has been able to spend time and think about this. So thank you very much on behalf of staff here.
Great. And I see Barb, I think you get the last word. Oh, you're muted, Barb. We can't hear you, Barb. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Before we take the vote, I just wanted to circle back to sort of the beginning. This is a foundation that I think is important for us to build from, and it will be in that spirit that I will continue to engage on this topic, and appreciate the time and effort that my fellow directors have given to it, into this dialogue. Continue to participate in it, and we'll vote in favor of the motion that's before us. Thank you.
Right. Okay, with that, I think we are ready to vote.
Okay, for resolution 240303 as written, Ava Community Energy,
Aye.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes,
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Okay, well, thanks so much for all the engagement on that and the great discussion. Okay, so we are on to item number 7, discussion of any individual member items. Is there anything else people would like to discuss? All right, I'm not seeing any there, so we will adjourn today's meeting. Again, thanks so much for all of the discussion, and farewell to Garish and Matthew. Sad day there, but we wish you both the best.